Welcome back to the Herefordshire Gardener channel. My name's Aaron and today I'm going to be showing you some updates of David Austin rose cuttings that I did approximately a month ago. It's very wet here in Hereford today. We've had rain since the early hours of this morning and it's not stopped. I think the garden definitely needs it to green everything up. So just bear with me. It's a bit wet outside, but I'm sure I'll get through it. Got a hood on this jacket, so can't go too wrong. So these are cuttings that I took approximately 4 weeks, just over a month ago. So today's the 22nd of July 2023, and these were taken on the 20th of June. And this is Teasing Georgia, bred and introduced by David Austin in 1998. Unfortunately, this one is retired, so it's no longer available from the garden centres and nurseries, in the UK at least. It's an absolutely beautiful rose, and there's a really nice, pleasant, strong tea rose fragrance to go with these blooms. You can see we've really progressed quite far. We've got the dormant buds that have broken down in there, and that's led to these new shoots that have come out. And you can see the majority of these Teasing Georgia have actually the dormant buds have awoken. There's a few in there that are still a little bit further behind, but we've got dormant bud on that one. None of the stems seem to have gone black, which is a really good sign. You can see there again, look, a dormant bud that's broken, another one down there that's breaking. Got dormant bud inside there that seems to be breaking. These flies have just come in now as I've taken the lid off. Again, we got another dormant bud in there. Not too sure about that one, but the stem looks very healthy, and so they seem to be doing relatively well. As I've said in previous videos, you can never be too certain you know, whether you're going to have 100% success with each stem. I mean, even when they shoot out like this, sometimes they can still fail on you and the whole cutting can rot. Some people have commented on previous posts and said, oh, you know, if I've got shoots like this, does that mean I've got roots? Not necessarily. The stems can actually shoot very early on before there's roots there, and what you can find is that the leaves just sort of dry up and fall off if there aren't any roots to support them. So you know, sometimes just having shoots there doesn't necessarily mean that your cutting is a success. I never tend to take cuttings that have already got dormant buds at this stage, you know, where they've starting to wake up, because they're only going to grow on the resources that the cutting has, and obviously they're going to end up looking something like this. But in a cutting that doesn't have any roots to support this type of growth, what's going to happen to this new growth is it's just going to go dry and shrivel up and fall off. And in my experience, the cutting tends to fail in those situations. So when I'm taking my cuttings, I'm wanting to look at something that's sort of this stage, dormant buds, not even sort of, this one's slightly further, you can see the buds starting to emerge, but I want to get, and as is this one's slightly emerging too. I'd be looking for very dormant buds, cuttings where the bud, as you can see in this one down in here, I want that to be almost just like a tiny dot on the surface of the stem and leaf junction. And what that means is that the resources that are contained within this length of stem, that's the water and the food that the cutting is going to rely on, it's not being completely consumed by the early growth of this bud, and instead the plant's got a chance to use those resources to put down some roots which will better support any potential growth at this leaf node region. So just to reiterate, I don't want to be taking cuttings where the dormant bud eye has already started to sprout, or in fact is at this stage, because inevitably, you know, the cutting without roots is not going to be able to support that. So when people are asking, you know, oh, my cutting seems to have grown a new stem, does that mean that I've got a new rose plant. It really does depend on how far down the process since sticking the cutting you are. These ones are they're about 4.5 weeks old, and so I'm quite confident actually with no black stems, which is a good sign, with new growth, and the fact that the growth is not withered away. I'm pretty confident that these Teasing Georgia here are probably going to be a success. I wouldn't sort of start disturbing these. I mean, some people will pull back on the stem to see if it feels firm. I don't really touch them. I don't bother much with them for at least sort of 7 to 8 weeks, possibly even longer. I don't really want to disturb any new roots that might have developed in there, and I know it's tempting to want to dig them out and have a look, but just have a bit of patience and a little bit of faith, and hopefully by not disturbing them they'll be able to develop a reasonable root mass, and that should hopefully then enable you to pot them up into individual pots at around about the 8 to 10 week mark, and then, you know, fingers crossed that'll be enough to allow them to go on growing and give you a new rose shrub in time. This is just a storage tub that you can buy from most supermarkets or DIY stores. I think it's like a 20 litre or 30 litre or maybe even 50 litre, I'm not sure, but you know, I drilled holes in the bottom of this, many holes, before I stuck these cuttings and put the potting compost in there, and that was just to allow any moisture that I originally put in there to drain away. It has a lid that goes on. I use the same container, just turned upside down with a stone on top, and what that means is rather than having the original lid like these ones in the back, if I had the lid on this now, you can see there are already a few of those shoots that are standing proud of this box, and all the lid would do is it just stop them from growing up. So by using the same container turned the other way round, it just means that I can stand it on top. The water won't get into the soil to re-wet them because they don't need that, and you know, they'll have plenty of room for these shoots to, you know, grow up. I've just noticed here on this Teasing Georgia, I don't know if you can see that, but we've actually got a bud form in there. I don't actually want these to bloom this year because I don't want energy which should be going into making roots down below the soil to go into here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to nip that bud out and just get rid of that. Seems a bit harsh, especially when the plant is just trying to bloom, but I want the energy to go back, as I said, down into that soil level at the bottom and start to produce healthy roots. So that's Teasing Georgia so far, at precisely 1 month and 1 day since they were stuck. So here we have some more cuttings in the same box as the Teasing Georgia cuttings. This one here is Brother Cadfael, introduced by David Austin in 1986. This is an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous rose. It bears globular clear pink blooms that are very similar, reminiscent to peony flowers. Stunning. They're held on practically thornless, darker stems, as you can see from these cuttings. And although the flowers are very big, they're actually held up very well on these strong stems, so they don't tend to nod. This one, unfortunately, is another one that is retired. It's a really, really nice rose by David Austin, if you can get this one in your collection. It has a gorgeous, gorgeous, absolutely wonderful old rose scent. So coupled with those globular peony-like flowers and these lovely stems, and also, not to mention the dark glossy green leaves, this is a really nice rose in my collection, and I would highly recommend to anybody interested. So these are the cuttings that were taken, again, same time that I took the Teasing Georgia cuttings. So these ones were taken on the 20th of June, and today is the 22nd of July. And as you can see, we're in a sort of similar state to the Teasing Georgia, maybe a little bit further on. In fact, you can see that there is new growth from the nodes that has shot out there, and we've got new growth up to sort of a couple of inches in height. Some of them are a bit further on than others, but you can see again, some of them are still a little bit further behind. You can see a nice healthy bud coming out there, which is good. Can't see any black stems on this. I'm really impressed with this particular batch of roses. We don't seem to have had much many lost. I think I've pulled out 2 in total between these two, so I'm quite happy with that. That's a pretty good success rate, and I'm probably gonna reuse this propagation method in future. I will do another video on how I propagate using the tub method, and hopefully you'll be able to reproduce that yourself and get similar results. But look at this one, you can see just down here we've got a dormant bud that broke and has given us this lovely, the new growth as well on all of these roses, in fact, has this gorgeous red colour which you'll be familiar with in spring when your roses start to wake up, and I just think it looks gorgeous. This one behind here you can see actually shows off that red stem of brother Cadfael, and that's literally what it looks like in the garden. So it's very different to things, other roses. There are some that are like this. There are many in fact that bear these sort of darker stems, but I just really like the lack of thorns, which makes it, you know, more practical for areas where you might be walking past a rose, you might touch it by accident or on purpose, and you're not going to get a nasty nip from it. But if you just look at this lovely growth, absolutely wonderful. So encouraging that we've got new life from the cuttings that were taken. I'm just trying to see if I can show you as many of these as possible. You can see this one here is not brother Cadfael, and I'm going to talk to you about that one in a second. I only did 8 brother Cadfael cuttings, and I think at the minute I've got 7 left 4 weeks later, so I'm pretty happy with that, and encouraged that I'm definitely going to get some here that I can repot up and eventually put out into the garden. And the one good thing about doing cuttings this way is that these are all going to be own root roses, and by own root I mean they're not grafted. So, you know, these are brother Cadfael roots and brother Cadfael shoots. So, you know, when we talk about new growth in your rose shrubs in the garden, you'll often see new shoots coming from under the soil level, and people will talk about the word suckers. And people say, oh, you know, if it's a sucker, remove it, cut it away. What they're talking about there is a sucker essentially is a new shoot from under the ground that comes from the rootstock of the plant, and often a lot of roses, particularly David Austin roses, are grafted. So you have a vigorous rootstock, that is the roots of a particular rose that is known to grow very strong healthy roots. And then what they'll do at the sort of junction at the bottom near the soil is they will graft one of these dormant bud eyes, there's a special technique to do it, onto the stem of that rootstock. And what will happen is those roots will support that new growth of the grafted rose, and that will then continue to grow and be the top growth of the rose. So you've got 2 roses essentially that are being grown, one for the roots and one for the shoots. The issue with those sometimes is the roots can actually send from the stem that's lower in the ground a new shoot up, and that shoot will be the same rose that the roots came from. And if left to continue to grow, because it is the same shoot as the roots, it actually becomes the more dominant shoot above ground, and eventually your graft will not be receiving the nutrients that it needs, because the new sucker or new shoot from the roots will take most of the nutrients, and it will kill off your graft. And eventually, if you're not careful, you will sort of look in the garden one day and think, what happened to that rose? Why have I got a different one in its place? And that's normally what's happened. So, you know, in those cases, we would normally say just remove the suckers so that they don't sap the energy from your grafted rose. But coming back to my earlier point, with these cuttings, we're actually getting roots from these developing underground. So if we did get any suckers from these later down in the line, then, you know, they're all going to be Brother Cadfael, and I'll just leave them and I'll end up with a nice bushy rose. That is assuming that Brother Cadfael does well on its own roots. That's another thing that I'm yet to discover with a lot of these roses, is how do they actually perform with their own roots. Time will tell, and I will update in the future. But this is Brother Cadfael, and it's looking fabulous. I'm really happy and pleased with these results. And so finally, this brings me to the last set of cuttings in this particular box, all taken again on the same day, in June the 20th 2023. Today is July the 22nd 2023, so we're just over a month. And here we have Geoff Hamilton, bred and introduced by David Austin in 1997. This one, as I understand, is also retired in the UK now. This is a wonderful rose. The stems on Geoff Hamilton are relatively thornless as well. There are a few thorns, but it's not anywhere like Gertrude Jekyll, for example, or even, as you can see, Teasing Georgia, which has quite a lot of thorns. So another attractive feature of this rose, and I really like the foliage as well on this, very similar to the other ones that we've reviewed today. A nice sort of dark, I'd say medium to dark green glossy leaf, which is really, really nice to see, and it contrasts well with those quite large, actually, pale pinked, old-fashioned cupped blooms that Geoff Hamilton produces. These cuttings, as I just mentioned, were taken just over a month ago. We can see these cuttings start from this one here up to here. In fact, I think, yeah, no, there is another one behind there. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that's how many I took 4.5 weeks ago, and that's how many still remain. So far with this one, touch wood, we seem to be doing okay. You can see this one in particular has shot out the dormant bud. We've got a little bit of a flower bud. I don't know if this is going to focus. Yep, there, a little bit of a flower bud forming on there. So what I'm going to do, again, like I did with the Teasing Georgia, so I'm just going to nip that one out, because I don't want the energy going into that flower. I want it to go into root development. Don't know if there's anything going on at the bottom of that, possibly. Maybe some more swellings down there and dormant buds waking up. You can see on the next one that's definitely becoming more swollen at the bottom. We're probably going to get a shoot out of there eventually, as we are on that one. You can see where a leaf used to be that I removed for the purpose of the cutting. The dormant buds are waking up. I'm not sure the top one on this one's doing much at the moment, but either way, the stem looks very healthy for just over a month, as do the leaves, and I'm pretty hopeful that this particular Geoff Hamilton is going to do well. Just having a look to see if there are any of the others that have started to shoot out, and can't really see that many of them have. If you look down there, you can actually see that one seems to be waking up a little bit. This seems very advanced, this one at the end. Not entirely sure why that one's gone further than the others. Perhaps this bud was already waking up before I did the cutting. You can see this is Brother Cadfael, very similar new growth as you get with most roses. You get this sort of red tinge to the new leaves, but that will green up, and eventually when the leaves are mature they'll go this medium to dark green. I think what is encouraging is, you know, even though we don't have any top growth on these yet, the fact that these stems are still very healthy and they've not gone black fills me with a lot of confidence that, if we haven't got much growth coming out of here and these are still looking pretty viable, then that to me suggests that we must have roots starting to emerge from below. And I prefer actually all of my cuttings to do it in this order, to grow roots first, and once it has even just a few roots, then to send out these dormant buds, because my experience shows me that those ones are much more likely to continue to grow on, and I have a lot of success with those ones. So I think maybe this Geoff Hamilton experiment with these cuttings, we could potentially be getting some really good results, and I'll have more to put out in the landscape. I'm going to leave these in this container probably for about another 4 to 5 weeks, and just allow them to continue to grow on and hopefully put on some roots, and then eventually I'll pot these roses up into individual pots and grow them on in there as well, probably for the next year at least. So that's it. That's a summary of where I am. Just over a month from doing these cuttings with for Teasing Georgia, with the brother Cadfael and with the Geoff Hamilton. I will be posting an update video in approximately another month's time, just to see how we've got on with these, and you know, if I feel that we're at a stage where I can start to pot them on, I'll film that video as well, and you'll be able to see the roots on these, and see how I pot them on and what I do with them then. This box has just remained in the same position that I put it in, so this container, as I mentioned earlier, just has another container on top, which is the same one that's at the bottom, and all that does is it just keeps the rain off of this soil and these leaves, because I do not want this compost medium to become saturated with water. By saturated I mean puddled. It's damp to the touch. It's got drainage holes at the bottom of the container, so you know, any excess moisture can escape at the bottom of the container, but you know, that hasn't been rewatered since I stuck them, and I don't intend to rewater it. I'll be popping that lid back on when I finish this video, and I often just put a stone on the top so it doesn't blow off. And again, just to reiterate, by having a tub on a tub, you get the extra height, so your cuttings can actually grow up into the upper container without being squished by a lid, which is what happens if you do what I've done in the back. I've got some smaller cuttings in there for now, but they will eventually need a tub on top of a tub. I find that works better. As I was saying, this has just been stayed in this position since I stuck the cuttings, and just to be clear, this never gets any direct sunlight. It's completely north facing. I'm in the northern hemisphere, and it gets lots of direct light from above, so light all day hitting down on this box, which is exactly what they need, but zero sun, because if, like me, you do some cuttings and you forget to move the box and it even gets just sunlight on it for 5 minutes, I'm not even exaggerating when I say this, 5 minutes of sunlight on these boxes will quite literally cut the leaves. I've done it time and time again by mistake, or I've put them somewhere where I thought that no sun ever touched that area, and you know, I've come back to find that the leaves are toasted, and those cuttings clearly are not going to do as well because they've suffered stress before they've even had a chance to put down roots. So completely 100% no sunlight directly on this box, but maximum overhead light, because they need that to produce energy, and that will hopefully get you to a stage like we're at today. So stay tuned. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified in future when I upload more content. I thought I would just briefly show you these cuttings that I took some time ago. I believe they were taken on the 31st of May, so we're on the 22nd of July today, so quite a number of months ago. I'd say this is at about the 7 to 8 week stage. Doesn't look very impressive from the surface. There's only 3 of them. This is Rosa Louise Odier. Louise Odier is not a David Austin rose, although she is available from David Austin. She's considered an old rose and was bred and introduced by Margottin in 1851. This was one of the first roses to bloom in my garden this year in 2023. An absolutely wonderful Old English looking rose, traditional cupped blooms, which I've got a lot of petal count in there. She has a really strong Old English rose fragrance. She's got almost like an antique look to her blooms, which I really like. And she holds her blooms for ages, and they sort of mature. As they mature, they go from a rich pink to a sort of pale pink colour. Never to white, but to an almost antique pink. It's just absolutely wonderful. I love this rose so much for the shape of her blooms, the colour, the way that they age, and her fragrance. She's very good with disease resistance too. And so these cuttings, although they don't look massively impressive, I mean, these leaves look like they've probably seen better days, but you've got to remember these were taken end of May, and they're still green. You know, they will eventually fall off. They're not going to last forever. But one thing I did want to show you was, although there doesn't seem to be a lot going on top, and you can see there isn't even a bud eye that's broke on these yet, on any one of them. Seemingly, if I just looked at that, I think, okay, the stems are still green, so I'm going to leave them. I could do the tug test, but as I said, I don't tend to do that very much. I just leave them be. And wait to see if we've got any growth up to 10 weeks. But if you look underneath the pot, ta-da, you can see there are some really chunky healthy roots there, presumably coming from this particular stem, although you can never be too sure. But just look at those roots. How cool is that? You can see the small tiny root hairs coming off there. I can't see many other roots. There's a slug there that needs to go, sorry Mr. Slug, but you are not going back in that container. I doubt very much it would eat the rose anyway, but I just thought I'd show you the fact that we got roots for definite in this pot off at least one of these stems, possibly all three. So I just wanted to highlight that. You know, even if you don't see anything going on the top, don't give up hope, because as I've mentioned earlier on in the video, if it's not shooting yet, it could possibly put in its energy into producing roots. And what I'll do is I will probably leave these in here for at least another couple of weeks, and then maybe at that point I'll attempt to repot them up. But I'm super happy with that result. I think I'm going to get at least one out of here, which is a result nonetheless. But that's Louise Odier. If you've not had a look at this rose, maybe add her to your wish list. Absolutely wonderful rose. I would say definitely ranks in my top 20 in the garden. I know she's not a David Austin rose, but she's got that classic Old English rose appeal, and that's why she's in my collection. I absolutely love this one. So that's Louise Odier. I shall do another update video, hopefully when these buds or buds down below decide to wake up and we get a bit more progress on these.